And I love him because he's like, she's not really seeing anybody because she's like as fuckable as a hedgehog, basically. She might be really pretty.
She's a really like, pretty but really prickly blue stocking porcupine.
She's got the sex appeal of a hedgehog.
Yeah. And Dorian does not like that.
She hates it. Nobody else gets to neg her.
Dude, you just to her face. You called her unattractive and like an under the desk slut, my friend.
Under the desk slut.
Like, that's exactly. If they'd had the terminology, he may as well have said that.
You're right.
Oh my God.
I'm Melody Carlisle.
And I'm Sabrina Bradley.
And this is Heaving Bosoms. This is the podcast where best friends recap romance novels and other kissing media that makes us swoon, snark, and refills our cups.
Whether you've read the book or are coming in blind, we'll lay bare every delicious scene and revel in the tropes and subgenres that make romance amazing.
All right, listener, strap in and strap on. Headphones are highly recommended. All right, we're cooking with gas already.
We are, listener. You have no idea what has led to this. It's cool. It's fine. Everything's fine. All
we're doing great over here.
Yeah. So Mel,
yeah,
I do have a question for you.
Tell me everything.
How's life been as a plant thief?
No. How dare you tell them about my criminal activity?
I told you when we talked on the phone that I was going to be bringing this up.
You're right. Ooh, and it still came out of left field for me. Why is that?
It did. I was like, when you were like, I was like, yeah, I have banter. And you were like, oh, what banter do you have? And I was like,
Best buckle up, Melody. You know what? Life as a plant thief is great. Listener, I had to have an emergency crown situation done. And everybody knows that as a frugal gardener, as the frugal gardener that I am, who doesn't mind waiting many a season for something to mature, I have a pair of clippers in my purse at all times.
Oh my God, you did not tell me that.
So that I can take just teensy little cuttings off of things, you know, nothing invasive, nothing terrible. However, I have maybe escalated.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm. I've maybe begun to escalate. Because after my crown situation, I was like, everything hurts. It's fine. And then on the way home, I was like, I deserve something nice. And my first thought is always food. You know, my first thought is always like ice cream or something like that. I was
just going to say ice cream. Mm-hmm.
But then I did, out of the corner of my little eyeball, I saw a tiny tuft that looked very familiar. And I was very excited about it. And so I did a scourge and I, did the wheel over and I got into this.
In your car when you realized this? Oh my God, listener, these are all details that I did not get on our phone call.
And so I pulled over and I was like, oh my God, it's free range yarrow. I've been looking for yarrow. None of my local nurseries have had any native yarrow in there. And I got some white yarrow seeds, okay? And so I am also growing some from seed. But, listener, there was just like free range yarrow and there was a bunch of it, okay? And so coincidentally, I don't know how this happened, I did happen to have a pot and a trowel in my car
Somehow
with me.
that is the least shocking thing that you have ever told me.
I don't even remember why I had them in there.
You just had them in there for the on the off chance that one day you would be traversing the city.
Yeah.
And find some free range yarrow.
Yeah. And so I pulled over, I went into that parking lot, and it was like one of those little median things in between two buildings, you know?
I cannot
so it's not really
believe
anybody's.
that you recognize this in motion.
Yes, I was going at least 35 miles per hour. And there was a place that's like not landscaped. You know what I mean? It's not like it wasn't. It was a place that had been neglected.
Listen to
for a
her
while,
validate
okay?
herself, listener.
Justifying my actions in a way that might sound defensive, okay? But I'm not at all defensive.
I mean, to be fair, I did come into recording and said, "How has life been treating you as a plant thief?" So
Yeah.
I feel like it's valid for you to be a little defensive.
I agree. Yeah, same here. I think so too. So anyway, I got out of my car and I just got a couple of little divisions, okay? Like I didn't take one of the whole things and I probably took like 1/32 of the amount of yarrow that was there and that I left there. Thank you very much. And now
you left it there for the other 31 plant thieves in your city.
Maybe. Listen, if you are in my city and you are a plant thief and you want to team up, let a bitch know. heavingbosoms.podcast@gmail.com.
Oh my God. No.
Okay, let's start
Whoever
a ring.
is listening, we are not. Who's going to be the money launderer?
No, he can't. Not me.
Then you can't have a thief ring.
Plant thief? Are you a plant thief who loves a math and maybe a tax code? Question mark.
I feel like it's less math and more something else. I'm not really sure what it takes to be a good money launderer, but I don't think a math degree is it, because I have a math degree and I still barely understand it.
Maybe more of an accounting degree, you know?
Oh,
maybe one of
yeah.
those, you know?
I bet an accountant could do it.
Have you worked at H&R Block ever? A listener who likes to steal plants? I don't even know why we would need to launder money.
I don't either. To fund shipping plants to people, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So I got some free range yarrow and it was amazing. And I'm also propagating some panicle hydrangea that I got a cutting off of with permission from the business owner. Thank you very much. Oh, man, it's just great. And I started planting my seedlings and like the garden.
I just wonder what that business owner was thinking. You know, like just this slightly unhinged lady walking in. Hey, you have a really pretty plant out there. Can I have some of your plant?
I love your hydrangea.
And they're just like, yeah.
Keep the crazy
please
lady
leave.
happy.
Just take some and go.
Yeah. You want to know who would not be very supportive? I don't think of my very justifiable and not at all criminal horticultural actions.
Is it the main character in this book?
Yeah, it's the main character in this book. She is a Scotland Yard through and through, until she's not, though. I will say that about her.
Yeah, she does have a little bit of revenge on the brain.
Yeah, she gets it done when she needs to.
Listener, we are doing The Highwayman by Kerrigan Byrne.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and keep my shit to myself a little bit because I am a Kerrigan Byrne fangirl.
She's read everything Kerrigan Byrne's ever written.
It's true. So we read this for my online book club, which is just so delightful. And we always get to meet the author at the end of the month, and it's wonderful, right? So I started this book because I knew that we were actually doing the last book in a spin-off series for this series.
Oh my God.
And I found out it was a spin-off series, and I was like, well, obviously I have to read that first too. So I got the audiobook so I could kind of listen in the background to The Highwayman.
Yeah. It's a good audiobook.
It took me 3 months to get through it. I guess I wasn't
my mind.
I guess I just wasn't in the mood for an audiobook.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to get through it, and then I decided to eyeball read the last like 50 pages of it. And then I proceeded to read. That's
why your mind was blown.
Yeah. So Yeah, by the way, listener, the first time I read this book, I didn't Sherlock Holmes a single thing in it. Period. Like, I had no idea. Everything that was coming, I was like, what? Whoa, no way. Oh my God. But yeah, I did eyeball read those last 50 pages, and then I did proceed to read the rest of this series, the Victorian Rebel series and the Good Girl series, in like 9 days.
Incredible. Wow.
So
I'm
that's
not
what happened.
Surprised.
And
yeah,
then
I really enjoyed this book. I really loved it. Also, I was on my period this week, and so it did make me cry, like, I don't know, 9 times. The amount of loyalty between all of these people just, like, hits me right in all of my heart parts.
Listener, if you're looking for a found family book, this is it.
Wow.
This is it.
This is found family to the extreme and done so well.
So what do you think of Morley as a character before we really jump into things?
Oh, I like him, Morley. I want him to break bad, though.
So do you want a spoiler?
Yeah,
He does get a book.
Fuck yeah. Yeah.
And it's wonderful. It's incredible.
Excellent. Yeah, he seems fine, you know?
Oh, he's fantastic.
He's just not right for her, fairly.
So we open up in this book with
oh my God,
some
with
little wee
children.
babies.
They're orphans. They're in an
are.
orphanage.
Mm-hmm. And this little 10-year-old boy is sad and crying outside of
And his
the
palms are
orphanage
all bloody.
because he got whooped on his palms
Ouch
by
town.
Sister.
Who cares? Sister, go fuck yourself. You know
Sister
what I
Maggot.
mean?
I know it starts with an
Yes.
M.
Love it, Sister Maggot. I dig it. She's
And
terrible.
he did try and take a little bit of extra bread. And so she did whip the shit out of his hands.
But he's hungry. They don't feed them enough.
Uh-huh. And so he's crying outside. And then this little girl comes up and goes, "Why are you crying?" And he says,
"Get out of
"Go
here.
away."
I'm not crying. I don't cry. I'm a big tough man."
Because, like,
She's
what
like,
else would a 10-year-old boy do?
Yeah. And so she scampers away, and he's like, good. She's out of here.
But then he's all sad. He's like, "I don't know why I was so mean to her when she's the first person to ever touch me in a way that wasn't meant to hurt me."
Oh.
Which, like, killed me.
Yeah.
Second time around. First time around. All times around, really.
Uh-huh.
But then she comes scampering back up with water and, like, cleansing solution and
scissors.
bandages.
Yeah. And she's like, "I'm going to doctor up your hands because my dad was a doctor in the Crimean War." And he's like, "But you're not a doctor." And she's like, "I'm the best you've got right now, bud." Oh, wait. Sabrina.
What?
I'm so sorry. We have to take a quick pause because we need to shout out some incredible patrons.
I'm so glad you remembered.
Okay. Hello.
Well, patrons, we're here to doctor up your metaphorical palms.
That's what we're going to do. Yeah, because you've been doctoring up our metaphorical bank account.
I don't think it's metaphorical, Melody.
No, it's not metaphorical. No, because you've been supporting the show so incredibly. So we're going to shout out some new patrons and then a few longtime patrons.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome, hey, and thanks to Brigitte C. and Patty VCK.
To Conchi S. and Anja.
Melissa L. and Tess.
To Lauren S. and Jenna J.
Ashley P. and Liz D.
And then Barbie H. and Sylvia P.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon.
We super appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. You make the show possible, frankly.
Yes. 10,000%.
Yeah.
And that show is one where we cry at little boys with bloody hands.
That's the one.
Listener, to be clear, this is a Sebastian book. Listener.
Oof.
This is a sad, broken boy book.
No, this is like a sad, tortured, tormented, like
It's
systemically abused, bad stuff.
But to
on
boil
every
it all
level.
down, he's just a really serious Sebastian, right? Like,
I mean,
the
he's
saddest,
maybe the most serious
the
Sebastian
brokenest.
we've ever met. You know what I mean?
Really?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember any of our other Sebastians suffering childhood R-word. Trigger warning.
Oh, God, yeah, I guess that's true.
Like, that's not great, you know?
Okay, you're right. You know what? You're right. This is the saddest, brokenest Sebastian we've ever had on the pod.
I don't like it. So, listen, they end up being friends. They decide to be friends, and it's very, very cute because they've never really had a friend before. Neither of them.
And from get-go, he's like, you shouldn't care for me. I'm a little demon. And she's like, well, I'm not, but I'm going to take care of you. And he starts calling her Fairy Lee instead of Farrah Lee. Yeah. And he's her fairy. And then we have this like...
She's his fairy. Yeah.
We have this, what's it called? Where it like zippy zaps? Montage.
Yeah, we've got a friendship montage, a childhood friendship montage. And it's so cute. Like
for 2 years.
Yeah, she teaches him to read, and it's like they're just so wonderful. And then at the end of this, he asks her to marry him because he finds out that she is betrothed already. She's not even 10 at this point.
To Sir Warrington.
Yeah, to Sir
Literally
Warrington.
The gum on the bottom of your shoe, but worse.
Absolutely. Yeah, he is a true capital V villain, cannot be redeemed, is not sexy. And he's like, well, what will save you from being married to that man? And she says, I think the only thing that would save me is being married to somebody else. And so he says, well, Fairy, will you marry me? And she's like, what? We can't do that. And he's like, yeah, we absolutely can. Come to the church and I'll do a hand fasting on us.
Yeah. And like the cutest part is he's like, I want to be a pirate. And she's like, but you'll be gone for so long. And he's like, well, then I'll be a highwayman because that's what, like a land pirate. And she's like, oh, that sounds incredible. And he's like, will you be a highwayman's wife? And she's like, yes.
I think that sounds like the best thing in the whole wide world. Of course I will. And then he says, and will you love me, Fairy? And she's like, yes, of course I will love you. And she says, will you love me? And he says, I will. Oh, Sabrina has the quote.
He says, I'll try, Fairy, but I have not done it before. I'll teach you that as well, she promised, right after I teach you to read. Love is quite like reading, I expect. Once you know how, you can't ever imagine not doing it.
Oh!
Dugan only nodded because his throat was burning. He put his arm around his very own fairy, reveling in the fact that he finally had something good that no one could take away from him.
Oh, except they can.
So, Mel, I have to tell you something. This being a reread was rough. This whole book was rough.
Why?
Because I knew everything that was coming. And I was like, this is going to be so dark and fucked up.
Yeah. Well, listen, he takes her to the Highlands church that's nearby, and he does a hand fasting on them. And he says, like, I think it's even in Gaelic, like, you are blood of my blood and bone of my bone. And she repeats it back to him. And then they seal it with a very, very chaste kiss, like a tiny little kid kiss. And both of them are like kind of shaking over it, and it's super cute. And now they're married. And then the next night, he's asleep and she crawls into bed with him. And he's like, oh my gosh, Fairy, what's the matter? And she says, Dugan, I'm sorry, Dugan. I just needed to feel safe, and I feel safe with you. And she tells him that she was almost molested by a priest.
Yeah.
A priest, apparently.
A pervert priest.
Is how my brain wanted. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And she managed to, like, hit him and run away, and she ran immediately to Dugan. And he was like, oh my gosh.
Of course she's going to run to her little husband.
And yeah, her husband and best friend, and like only support that each of them have had for the past like 2 years or something ridiculous. And so he's like, okay, we're going. Like, put on these pants of mine and we're going to run away and we're going to get away from here because that's the only way I'll be able to protect you from this incredibly powerful adult. And as they're getting everything out of the larder, they're like trying to take a few, provisions so they can leave on foot. Because it's cold out. And it's cold. And then somebody grabs her, meaty hand grabs her, and I'm pretty sure it's that nun.
Sister Maggot.
Sister Maggot. Yeah.
And then the priest is there. They have some crazy stuff happens. Dugan whips a knife out because he was going to protect her, and he does stab the hell out of that priest.
Yeah, because he's trying to take her. And so now he has to go to prison for murder. And
At
he's
12 years old.
Yeah, yeah. So then we zippy zap 17 years. Chapter 2, 17 years later. What?
So,
I said?
hello, friends. What did you think was going to happen?
I don't know.
Were we going to follow them as children? No.
I mean, I was maybe thinking it would be like a 5-year. I don't know. 17 is so long.
Well, you learn why it was 17 years because it was necessary. So we zippy zap, and we are with Farrah Lee, and she lives in the Bohemian area of London. She's got this crusty old landlord that she hangs out with, and she hangs out with all these artists and authors and all of these things, and she lives above this coffee shop. And honestly, to be a widow at 27 who can just do whatever she wants because she's on the shelf in this artists area of London, frankly, like,
goddamn
count
dream.
me in.
Yeah.
Count me in.
She works at Scotland Yard. She's a widow. And so she gets to be like a blue stocking and a cool ass chick. And she doesn't have to like have a chaperone to go to places or whatever. And she really likes her life. Like she enjoys it now. And so for her entire life after that, she's gone by Farrah Lee Mackenzie because that was Dugan's last name.
Mackenzie.
Yeah.
And when she says that she's a widow, she's talking about him.
She's and at this point in the book, I wasn't sure. You know what I mean? Like 17 years later, at 27, she could have been married again and widowed for natural causes, you know, without a blink, frankly, from me or anybody else. So I wasn't sure at this point still. But she's a widow. And she walks into Scotland Yard and there's like a big commotion. Yeah. Big old commotion. And they're like, Captain Morley, Chief Inspector Morley needs you with your note-taking pad down in the dungeon, basically.
Because the reason there's a hullabaloo is that Dorian Blackwell, the Black Heart of Ben Moore, has been captured. And we learn his history, at least as far as Scotland Yard is aware of it. And basically, he came out of nowhere like a decade ago and slowly just took over the seedy underbelly of London and then started taking over everything bigger and greater than that. Yeah, he just didn't stop. He's like, well, let's just take it all. This is mine. I'm the leader. And and don't
one
fuck
of the
with
ways
me.
that he did that is like people would notice that there was one fairly noteworthy criminal in like a captain position in whatever organization. And that guy would disappear and then be replaced by somebody that was loyal to Blackwell.
So I was having a moment reading this book, and I have this every time I read a historical where somebody's a villain. I'm like, God, it was just so easy back then, you know?
Right.
Like, it was just so easy.
Man, you could do any murder, frankly.
You could just disappear a person and insert somebody into their place.
Yeah.
And all of the little minions are just like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So now he's like richer than the king. Okay, he's got lands all over the world.
More land holdings.
He is a king, okay?
He also regularly donates to charities that benefit children, and he sponsors the middle class and like careers of performers and artists and opera singers, and like he is known as Robin Hood.
Yeah, they consider him to be like a Robin Hood kind of figure, which you beat still my beating heart.
Well, and then it's noted that he would have been left alone because everything that he did is technically legal.
Pretty okay.
But then police chiefs and important people,
a couple of like
recently
prison guards,
a judicial fancy judge
somebody
guy.
Or other.
Yeah, and of course they're like, well, obviously it's Dorian Blackwell's fault.
Yeah, but they've got no fucking proof. They got no proof whatsoever. Okay, they've
Except
got
now
nothing on him.
He's been arrested, and she walks into that little dungeon, and he's already bloodied up because Sir Morley is pissed
because her direct boss, who allegedly doesn't usually do a scuff 'em up, with prisoners. Doesn't usually bloody them at all.
I don't
right?
just
I don't know that I
just based on how we see Morley in this book, I'm like,
no, I don't know.
maybe you
about that.
just never saw it,
Yeah.
Farrah?
Anyway, so she goes in and she is supposed to be taking notes on this interrogation. And Blackwell looks at her and he says, Chief Inspector Morley, more brutal men than you have tried to get my secrets, and so have more beautiful women than her. And I was like, how dare you, sir? I was very mad at that comment.
You were already on Farrah's side. You're like, this is the most beautiful lass in all of the land. How dare you?
Don't neg Farrah, okay?
That's what he was doing. He negged the fuck out of her. Well, he was doing it to get a fire lit under Sir Morley's ass.
Yeah, because the rumors are that they've been spending more and more evening time together, and he has been escorting her more and more to things like the theater and other places, probably a botanical garden if they have any taste. And so...
Have you met Sir Morley? Of course he's taken her to a botanical garden. Are you serious?
Most definitely. Okay, so then... he's like trying to figure out what's going on. And we get a lot of this backstory about the, judicial officials that are disappearing and all the business within this conversation. And at another point, he's like, oh, yeah, how much time does your beautiful secretary spend on her knees below your desk with your bleep in her? And then he gets smacked because good job, Chief Inspector Morley. He should get whacked right in the mouth for that.
Dude, Dorian is really doing the most in this scene. He is such a fucking asshole.
Yes.
So, yeah. Morley ends up ordering her out of the room. He's like, get out of here. Let me handle this.
You don't need to see this.
He does. And now we have zippy zapped, and it is 3 days later, and we are seeing Dorian, and he's talking to his inside man at Scotland Yard.
Yeah.
And that's who helped get him free. We find out that he was arrested.
And also get him arrested.
Intentionally. Yeah. He was intentionally arrested. And then he is talking to McTavish, who's the inside man. And McTavish is like, why do you care? Well, so Blackwell asks him, what do you know about that lady clerk? And McTavish is like, please don't do anything to her. She's just a sweet lass.
And I love him because he's like, she's not really seeing anybody because she's as fuckable as a hedgehog, basically. She might be really pretty.
She's a really pretty but really prickly blue stocking porcupine.
She's got the sex appeal of a hedgehog.
Yeah. And Dorian does not like that.
He hates it. Nobody else gets to neg her.
Dude, you just to her face. You called her unattractive and an under the desk slut. My friend.
Under the desk slut.
That's exactly. If they'd had the terminology, he may as well have said that.
You're right.
So then he looks McTavish dead in the face and he's like, I'm not going to do anything to her. But he also is like, having scruples is a dangerous thing for men like you to have. If I can't trust your greed, then I can't trust anything about you. And it's like, oh shit. But McTavish, precious baby,
being a sweetie.
He takes that in hand and keeps going. He's like, but she's a really nice lady. Please don't hurt her.
Yeah.
Please don't do anything.
And they have this back and forth about getting a black heart like Blackwell's. And yeah, go ahead. Do you have the quote?
Yeah. So McTavish is worried about all of these things. And Blackwell looks at him and he's like, that's where you're wrong, Inspector. Every man is capable of a heart such as mine. They just need to be given the right incentive.
And McTavish says, okay, well, I'm not looking for any of those kind of incentives, if that's what you're thinking. And he says, I'll tell you a secret, McTavish. I didn't want those incentives either.
And that's the first time that you look at Blackwell and cry. What's happened to you, bud? And then you find out what's happened to him, and you're like,
is
Oh, fuck.
terrible.
It's so bad.
Is what it is.
Yeah, so Farrah has shown back up at Scotland Yard because she's going for a night out on the town with Sir Morley.
Mm-hmm.
She's like friends with all of the like sex workers down at the docks, the dock walkers, and she knows all of these people. And that's like part of the reason that she is so safe on the streets of London is she knows all of the criminals. She sees them when they come in. They know exactly who she is. They know that she's not the one arresting them.
And they know that if she possibly can, she will do anything she can to help, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that vein, we meet Gemma. She is a sex worker who has a terrible, terrible trafficker. He's incredibly brutal.
Druthers.
He beats her up all the time. Druthers, yeah. And so Farrah promises her that when she is released from this round of being arrested.
Yeah, because Gemma's like, thank God, I'm gonna have a night of like where I'm on my back and I get to sleep. And it's like, Gemma, no.
I know.
Well, because Farrah saved her at one point, or like got her out of it, but then she ended up just stuck right back into it, which is a great example of how this is the systemic kind of shit.
Absolutely. Well, and especially during this period in Whitechapel specifically, like one of the only ways that a lot of poor women could get shelter at night is to be a sex worker, you know, if they possibly could. So anyway, she's like, I'm going to figure out a way to get you away from Druthers. And that's why I'm going to meet you tomorrow morning. I'm going to meet you and we're going to figure it out. Then she goes out on her night on the town with Morley and it's fine. It is a perfectly reasonable, friendly date.
We also find out through her inner monologue, kind of talking about things, that she got the job at Scotland Yard so she could get information in the very, very beginning, or she used her position to get information about what happened, you know, a decade ago. We don't know what happened a decade ago, but we know that something happened. And it's real sad. I don't know why I'm acting so happy right now.
Well, it's an intrigue at the very least.
It is.
So he takes her, you know, he takes her to the stairs that go up to her rooms. And he's the kind of guy that talks about having a particular line of questioning for her. I mean, I wanted to speak with you about a particular matter, he says. And she's like, oh, I don't know what that means.
She's like, I know exactly where this is going. Please don't do it.
And please don't. And so he's like, did you have a good time with me tonight, Farrah? And she's like, yeah, I find that I like your company more than a lot of people's. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, I figured we could really run a good society home together. And you're a person that I would rather spend my nights with than anybody else I can really think of at the moment. So
how romantic.
Just wondering.
Would you like to enter into a relationship, like a partnership on paper with me?
I mean,
basically,
that's what a marriage is.
Yeah, and she tells him, I don't think I'd be a dutiful wife. I am too set in my ways. I like my freedom and all of these things. And he says, was your first marriage so awful? And she says, no, it was just tragically short, which is depressing as hell. And then they kiss. And it's fine, but she can't stop thinking about that sexy Dorian Blackwell.
How would he kiss? I bet it would be very compelling, she's thinking to herself. Oh, because when she walked in, this was one of my favorite lines. When she walked into the interrogation, she noticed that the two men had very similar, like, initial flashes on their faces. And it was like one of the layers was hunger on both of their faces.
Well, and we didn't describe Blackwell because he's a striking man. Okay?
Oh, yes, please.
So his features were those of cruel brutality. His one good eye had that amber quality that had belonged to the jaguar, because she did talk about this big predator.
Apex predator.
That she saw at the zoo one time, or like a circus or some kind, whatever they call it back in the timies.
And how they go preternaturally still when they see some prey.
The flickering lamplight made it glow gold against his burnished skin.
Yeah.
It was his other eye, though, that arrested her attention, for starting above the brow and ending at the bridge of a bladed nose was a jagged, angry scar, interrupted by an eye leached of every pigment but blue, by whatever had caused the wound. And indeed, he stared at her like a predator recognizing his preferred meal and lying in wait to pounce until she haplessly wandered into his vicinity. Yep,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. Listener, I wish you could have seen that. But he's the predator. Everyone knows. Like,
Yeah.
Dorian goes someplace and it's like, oh yeah, that's the apex here. Like,
Oh yeah, we don't fucks with him.
that's king of the jungle. So
anyway.
they have their little smooch.
Yeah, and she's like, let me think about it because these things shouldn't be decided quickly. And he's like, okay, well, can you give me some hope? And she's like, okay, bye.
That's
See you
exactly
later.
it. Bye.
He
And
says,
then
will you come to church with me
Oh
tomorrow?
my god, talk about the least sexy thing you can possibly ask me.
And she is in full boudoir mode. She's like, maybe I won't be untouched before I'm 30. That would be incredible.
She's like, I'll get dick down by you, but
could
I don't
go-
want to go talk about the Lord with you.
Exactly. And so she's like, I don't really like church very much, but come around for tea. And he's like, yeah, okay.
And then she walks into her little loft, or little, what's it called? Her little landing?
flat.
Nope. Yep, that's it. Her little flat.
And her life changes forever because she gets grabbed.
Dorian is standing in her fucking living room and he looks her dead in the face and says, I hope you enjoyed that kiss. It'll be your last. And then blackout. Like, what the fuck, Dorian? Could you be possibly any more ominous and terrifying?
Sinister.
So she wakes up and she
On
she
a
has no idea
train.
where she is. Until
Yeah.
she registers they're on a train and she can hear Dorian and somebody who we don't know yet named Murdoch talking, and they're just having this little conversation and she doesn't really understand what they're saying, but one thing that she does get is that they're about to drug her again. So that she's quiet for the rest of the journey. And
So
she's
the
like,
rest
what?
of the journey doesn't bother her.
And then she finally comes to again, and Dorian doses her again, and he's like, I never forget. Dorian, Jesus Christ, dude, just give her the drugs. Don't be a fucking lunatic about it.
Murtaugh is like, you should dose her again. And he's like, I just don't want you to forget. And he's like, I never forget. One of the things, like a couple of the different phrases that she hears is like Murtaugh asks him if he's going to tell her, and then Dorian cuts him off and he's like, no, never. And then another time he's like, well, do you think she's going to give you what you want? And he says, I won't give her a choice. It's like all very sinister. And then,
So fucking ominous.
and then she wakes up in a castle in the Highlands.
Yeah,
So-
with Dorian watching her sleep, he's just posted up by the fireplace staring at her, and she doesn't realize it until she gets out of bed and walks for a second, and then she's like, oh my god, there's a man there. Like, what the fuck, Dorian? So
I
that
don't remember
happens.
this part. I thought it was Murtaugh.
No,
But Murtaugh
so
wakes her up in
Dorian's
the morning. Yeah.
standing there and she's like, I'll have Scotland Yard after you. And he's like, try. I could make it so that you're never found. And she's like, what the fuck?
She in her mind,
And-
she's like, does that mean alive or dead?
Yeah, and then he basically does a proposal. He's like, we're getting married. Yeah, this is all happening. This is happening the night before. He basically is like,
No, she's in a bath.
no, not yet. He's like,
What are you talking about?
it's the night before. This is chapter
Okay.
5. Like, it's in the middle of the night because he's like, you're going to marry me. And she's like, no, I'm not. And he's like, were you going to marry Morley? And she's like, well, no, I'm
And she's
not.
no.
And he's like, well, you let him kiss you. And she's like,
Right.
okay, doesn't mean I'm gonna marry him. And then at one point he leans forward in the dark and you can see this glimpse of pain and longing in his eyes. And he's
His
like,
one eye,
he's like,
as
go
she
to
always says.
Go to sleep, Farrelly. You're out of danger tonight.
Oh,
And
that's
then
right.
she lays down and just passes out. And I'm never in a million years. Never in a million years would I pass out in that room after that conversation.
Honestly, I think I would like panic pass out. You know what I mean? I would like escape.
Oh, you'd
That
faint.
would be my version of escaping.
You'd be
It's just
maybe
like I need to be unconscious.
maybe I just go to bed, and when I wake up, I'll be back in my flat, and this will be a fucked up dream.
Honestly, that used to be what I did with my mom when we were in the car. My mom would take the opportunity for me being a captive audience to like talk to me or sometimes like berate me for whatever was, happening at that time. And then at some point during the ride, she would look over and I would just be asleep against the door because I just had to escape.
Are you a Sebastian melody? Are you just a sad, broken boy?
Everybody has different levels of Sebastianism. You know what I mean? Anyway, so yeah, she passes out. And then in the morning, Murtaugh is there. And she's like, whoa, there's a man. And basically she finds out that he and every other guy in the castle at the moment were all in Newcastle prison with not only Dorian, but also Dugan.
Mm-hmm.
And they all know each other and they all know about her because they were in prison with Dugan at Newcastle. And they were all besties, as much as you can be besties in that environment.
The reason they know about her is he used to tell them all stories about her to like up their spirits and
pass the time
yeah,
and make everybody feel safer and like there was hope.
And they didn't actually for a long time believe that his fairy existed, and then they found her, and I just it would be really emotional.
Yeah. Well, and so we didn't describe her either, but one of the reasons that fairy like really worked as far as a play on Farrelly is that she has like almost silvery blonde ringlets and like, she's very pale and she's very
cherubic.
Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. So he's like, yeah. And she finds out that like he tries to tell her that she's safe here. He says that they grabbed her and they kidnapped her because she is in danger. But he wants her to know that that danger cannot touch her in that castle with all of these men, because all of them would lay down their lives for her. And that is Dorian is at the top of that list.
The tippy-toppiest.
Tippity-tap-top. And she's like,
Interesting. So Murdoch does leave, and then she's like, okay, it's time to go. And so she gets her police. She gets her little cover-up. She puts her shoes on and she goes down the stairs, and she's real smart about it. And she gets all the way to the kitchen and there's nobody there. And she's like, I'm going to go. And then she gets stopped.
Gets grabbed.
She does get grabbed by the sweetest, most gigantic man.
And he's so sweet. And he has scars all over his face and
he's been through some
head.
serious head trauma as a child.
Yeah. And he speaks a little bit slowly. But she finds out and she realizes that, like, he made the delicious breakfast that she made.
Yes. She also decides to name him because he doesn't have a first name.
I had a hard time with this.
Fucked up.
I was very mad at her.
She named him Frank after Frankenstein.
She says it's perfect for a Frankenstein. And I was like, Farrah? That is unkind. That is not generous.
That is so,
especially because, like, and I don't know. You know that one of my, like, really soft spots is, like, taking advantage of or making fun of people with less or different mental capability. You know what I mean? And this moment was tough for me because we find out that he thinks it's like such an honor, you know, because he's heard of her for his whole life. And then we find out that he goes through this horrific trauma, this head trauma injury situation at the prison. And so now she's like almost deified to him.
Mm-hmm.
She's Dugan's fairy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he thinks it's so beautiful and cool and such an honor, and she's making fun of him.
Yeah, and I don't think that she intended it to be that way, but that's definitely how it comes across.
I didn't like it. I was very mad at her for a while.
Yeah.
And it wasn't to the point that I would have DNF'd.
Uh-huh.
But it was borderline for me, Melody, just because that's one of my, like, cannot handle it.
That's one of your
things.
hard limits, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so they're in the kitchen, and she's like, let me out. And he's like, no. And she's like, please let me go.
And then he says, no, he needs you.
Mm-hmm. And then he also lets her know that, hey, he's actually waiting for you. He needs to talk to you. Would you like some pastries for the road? And so he does give her the most delicious strawberry pastries, and she does meander off. She gets to...
Well, but listener, I just need you to know that when he said he needs you, she thinks he means right now in the study, but he does not mean that. Those are two separate thoughts out of Frank Walters. The first one is he needs you in his life, in his heart, in his world, period, the end. And the other one is he wants to talk to you right now. They're not the same thing.
They're not the same thing. I love how much you love that. So she ends up in his study, and Dorian shows up, and he's like, so I hear you already tried to escape. And she's like, I did not. I was hungry and needed to be fortified before I saw you. And he says, with pastries? And she's like, yes. And then she shoves one straight into her face and just like chomps on it. Like this pastry, she is so dehydrated and anxious. And so it's just like chewing on tar.
On dust. She can barely swallow it. And then he's like, I'm gonna see if that's really true. And so he goes to grab it from her hand. And then he's like, he pulls back, even though he's wearing gloves, he pulls back and he's like, please set it on the table. So she does. And then he picks it up from the table and eats it. And he's like, oh yeah, I can see how that would be fortifying.
It definitely sweetens the moment.
Yeah. So then he tries to figure out what the hell she's been doing for the past while, because he hasn't been able to find her and he wanted to. And she says that she didn't realize that he was at Newcastle with Dugan. And he says, yeah, we were at Newcastle together. And like, I was sort of a right cunt to him at first.
God. He tells the whole fucking story about like their history, how like he threw a rock at Dugan and Dugan turned around and was like, no,
I'm going to
like,
whoop you hard.
Rock right back at him. And then they became besties.
Because then he says that up until that point, he was like the youngest and he was the scrawniest. He was the weakest link, right? And then once they saw,
because he's 12 years old and sent away for murder.
Yeah. And once they saw like the hatred in his eyes when he retaliated against that rock that was thrown, they were like, oh no, this kid is actually scary. Then Dugan was the only one who could read. And so he could read the lines of like where each prisoner was going. And he grabbed a few of the kids that he wanted to go into a safer line.
And he could read because Farrah taught him.
Farrah taught him too. Yeah. So he saved all of their lives. And Dorian was like, to this day, I have no idea why he grabbed me too. But he saved my life that day. And then we became best friends. And then they were like inseparable. And they started being called the Blackheart brothers. He and Dorian, because they looked very much alike, which was maybe my 7th Sherlock Holmes moment up to this point, Sabrina.
I don't know how I didn't know. Because like there's so many. When I was rereading it, I was like, ping, 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 ping. Like it was just all the way through the book. And then like I gaslit myself rereading this book where I was like, it can't actually. That's not actually what. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I'm getting this storyline mixed up somewhere else.
It's too obvious the second time reading it.
It's too fucking obvious.
Sorry, listener. When we chatted, like just friend chat the last time, at the very end of the call, we usually try not to talk about the books.
Talk about book.
We're having other, talks. But then Sabrina was like, I just have one question for you. Did you know? And I was like, wait, what?
Well, duh.
Yeah.
You dud me.
conclusion, it was because it took you 3 months to finish the audiobook. Like, I wouldn't have remembered the signs if I had broken it up into that long anyway.
Yeah.
As well.
So, turns out, Farrah, so we find out this is all going to kind of be a hodgepodge. So, we find out that what was happening in Farrah's life is she was off working for, when do we learn about the carriage? Is that now?
The carriage? When she
like how she follows
away
him?
on the train.
That's later.
After their wedding. Yeah. Right now, we learn that she brought like cheese and crackers and extra food to him every single day.
For 7 years.
At Newcastle. And he didn't know
it
that
was
it was from her.
And so, honestly, I was shocked that he got it.
Same. I was about to say he never. I was expecting Dorian to say he never got that. Like the guards kept it because why the fuck would they give it to him?
It turns out that he got the food, but he didn't get the letters that she wrote every day.
None of the notes.
Yeah, and so she was actually there after 7 years. 7 years of doing this, listener. She was there the day, and she went to take it to them, and they were like, "Oh, he's dead.
He died."
Dugan's dead.
He was murdered. They didn't tell him that,
They didn't say that. They just said that he died.
He died of like a schmolera or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Something.
Or like a different
whatever
England Times disease.
Yeah, that doesn't spread. So...
Well, but that's not schmolera. You know what I mean? Like, cholera is incredibly communicable.
Yeah. That's what I I know that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. How ridiculous is that thought?
Because it comes up later.
Yeah, 2 different times. Because she supposedly dies of cholera too. We find out.
So she basically looks him dead in the face, and she's like, if I'm going to believe this story out of your mouth, that you are Dugan's friend, all of these things, I need you to hold my hand and look me in the eye and tell it to me again. And he's like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
And she says, I can't trust anybody that won't even shake my hand. And he decides to be vulnerable with her. He's never told anybody this.
During his time in prison, he has been disinclined to the touch of another. And it's like, oh no.
Yeah, it's bad. He doesn't want human contact because it hurts terribly no matter what.
Yes.
That's what he learned in prison. So they end up talking more about Dugan, and she says that it was her fault. Like, she's felt terrible this whole time because if she had just, just allowed the priest to do what he was going to do, Dugan never would have been in a position to murder him and go to prison.
Well, and she's like sobbing at this point.
Yeah, of course. And Dorian's like, he never, ever thought that. And he would be so upset if you were blaming yourself. And she's just like, I cannot handle this anymore. And she runs out into the fields of heather. And he lets her. Walters goes to go after her, and he stops Walters. And then he's like, oh, let her go, Walters. And he goes, Frank. And he's like, Frank? He's like, yeah, that's my name. She named me this morning. And
my
he's
heart.
Like, of course she did. And then he says, what's the matter with your fairy, Dugan? And in Dorian's mind, he says this was a problem he was running into more and more. And then he looks at this poor injured man in his beautifully broken brain, and he says, I'm not Dugan. Dugan died, remember? And then this poor gaslit injured man says, oh yeah, I can't remember things very well.
How did I not know? How did I not get it the first time around?
So anyway, then she goes back up to her rooms later on, and Murdoch is like, he's not that scary. He would do anything for you. And she's like, why? And he's like, because you're Dugan's fairy. You know, like he tells her like how significant she is to every single man, even if they had never met her before. And then he runs her a bath, and he's got like a screen up, and he's in there chatting with her and like telling her about what it was like in Newgate.
And he gets interrupted when he is saying, I mean to say, I know it does not seem like it now, but you can trust him. The rest of us, we'd lay down our lives for yours. But Blackwell, he'd do that and more. He'd rip the beating heart from his chest. He'd give up his soul if you'd only... It is making a rather large and fallacious assumption that I have a heart to give or a soul.
He's
Blackwell
in the bathroom now.
walked into the bathing area.
Oh. And he's like, Murdoch, fuck off.
Well, and like
get out of here.
This is just important to me. Like, it's
Me,
not
no,
a
same.
huge...
I was about to say this.
The reason she's comfortable bathing in front of Murdoch
And the reason that he let him into her rooms at all
is because he's gay.
He's
That's
gay.
why he went to prison, because he fell in love with the son of an earl, and when they got caught, the earl called him a predator.
This is fucking heartbreaking. Absolutely.
He was in love.
And they were in love. And instead of being outed in a place where being gay was illegal,
bad,
literally.
Yes.
Well, no, and illegal. Like you could be sent to Newgate prison. Or be like executed or whatever. Yeah, he said I was preyed upon, and he didn't stand up for him, and so Murdoch went to Newgate prison.
Yeah,
Terrible.
It's pretty fucking awful. And the reason it's super important comes later in this book.
Because of a certain footman.
A little stuttering, adorable baby.
What a beautiful fucking soul. So anyway, now Dorian's here, and he's like, Murdoch, get out. I've got stuff to discuss with this lady.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
At this point, Dorian is just looming over her in the bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take classes on how to be a sinister asshole? You know? I feel like this is right out of the playbook, right? Like looming over her while she's in the bath and being like, well, like being just a naughty man. He's described as a naughty man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so she's like, you need to get out. This is not okay. And he's like, my castle, my rules, basically. And he says, I can give you everything you want in your entire life and imagination, but I won't tell you about it unless you wash. And so she's like, oh my God. So she grabs the soap that importantly to me for some reason
smells like lavender.
Heather and honey. No, heather and honey.
Where did the lavender come from?
Heather is also purple?
Anyway.
So he says, I can make you into a countess again. And she's like, I'm not a countess. What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're saying. And he's like, can we please just stop with this? You use your husband's name, but your real name is Farrelly Townsend. And you were the son of the Earl of Schmergel, who also fought in Crimea.
I am so proud of you for remembering her actual last name.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is truly incredible.
Thank you. I literally thought about it today, and I said it to myself multiple times.
Wow.
Just to make sure it happened. Yeah.
I like the eyeball look.
Yeah.
You're
really doing my best.
Yeah, so he basically tells her all of her history that he knows of, and mostly that there's this long contested fortune, and now this woman has come out of nowhere and declared that she is the daughter of the Earl of Northgate? Northampton?
North Bang.
North Bang.
I don't know. Anyway, North Walk?
Yep, I just looked it up. It's in my notes.
That sounds the least probable to me.
I like North Bang, so like it's fine.
I like North Bang quite a bit, yeah. So she's come out of the woodwork and she's been like, I've had amnesia for my whole life, except now I don't have amnesia
Which, like, to
anymore.
be fair, I'd read that book. You know, I have read that book.
Absolutely. But also,
that's not what's
she's
happening.
married to the former steward of the Earl of North Bang.
Yeah.
And the one who was affianced to Farrah Lee, which is coincidental.
Farrah, what was your dad thinking?
Well, we find out.
No, I understand, but why would you betroth your unborn child, practically,
Yeah. to a person who was 18 years older.
Age?
No, he was 18 at that point.
How old was her dad?
Older?
Still. Still, I don't know why we're done. These are just
Yeah, it really doesn't.
semantics, but like this is still like fucked up in a lot of ways. Like, bud,
absolutely.
come on, dude. Like,
no, and at first she thinks it's because like her dad must have been doing something criminal or bad, and like this fucker had, you know,
dirt on him.
Had dirt on him. Yeah.
Yeah.
We find out later it's just because he was big hoodwinked.
Yeah, it was real sad. So basically, Dorian's like, I want you to come forward as the rightful heir of the Townsend fortune, and I will help you get that fortune. And she's like, in exchange for what? And he's like, marrying me. And she's like,
my favorite part is that, my favorite part is like, she's like, it's not even possible. It's especially not possible because a woman can't claim titled whatever unless she's married. And he's like, funny, you should mention that. You're going to marry me. And she's like,
she's like, that's a shitty proposal. And he's like, a proposal requires a question.
Right. I did not ask a question. I informed you that you are marrying me, period, the end. And so they go round and round, and then finally she's like, you know what? I will accept your terms, but I have one condition. And he says, all right, lay it on me. And she says, I want a family. Like, I didn't think it was possible, but the one thing that I've always wanted and I thought was just like a pipe dream is a family that I could have that's like I remember. I had a really, really, really wonderful childhood until my mom and dad and sister died and I was sent off to that terrible orphanage. I want to create a home that's full of love and joy and kinship. And he's like, hard pass.
And then this bold bitch stands up fully naked out of her bath and looks him dead in the face. And he is so horny. He's like,
he
absolutely not.
Himself.
I will not. I will never. And he's like, I can't touch you. You don't want me to touch you. And she's like, you don't have to touch me. As far as I'm aware, you don't have to touch me at all, except with your...
That's right. She's like, I've met many a dock walker. Seems to me you don't even have to disrobe to get that done.
Just whip that willy out, my friend.
And he looks at her and he says, you want me to treat you like a common dock walker? And in her brain, she's like, I mean, yep. Yeah. I'm
not
really
even mad about it.
He says, we're getting married on the morrow.
So then we zippy zap. And she and Frank have spent all day cooking food. And
it's so cute.
Like all of these meals, she has a sweet tooth. So they have all of these desserts. There's all of these things. It's just a table for one with like the most obscene amount of food.
Yeah.
Ma'am. Like until recently, weren't you also a not particularly well-off clerk at the Scotland Yard?
Yeah. She hasn't had this amount of bounty put in front of her
since she was
or like
7.
The ability, since forever.
So Dorian shows up and she says, you have the reputation of a hedonist. And he says, maybe so, but you have the palate of one. And it just made me really happy because there's like 8 different entrees that like, this is too much food. I was so hungry after this.
I know.
So they have some fun, cute repartee about like his torture dungeons and his harem.
Yeah.
And
there's all these rumors
things
about him. And he's like, yeah, none of them are true. Basically.
Yeah. And then she ends up, more importantly, she's talking about his supposed harem, and she says, but perhaps one of them could have enticed you to do something other than watch. His expression turned serious. You're the only woman I'd even consider bedding. And I swooned.
Yeah.
And then
it's
she's
time to
gonna
get married.
Importantly.
Sorry.
Hang on. importantly, she eats a dessert and she gets a little whipped cream on her mouth.
Oh, and she licks
and then
it
she
off.
swipes it off of her mouth with her finger because she can't find her napkin because she threw it at that cad.
That's right.
And then she licks it off of her finger, and he straight up crunches a wine glass into pieces unexpectedly.
And cuts himself.
And just shatters. Oh my God. I'm not going to lie. This took me out of the book again. I remember it taking me out of the book the first time too, where there's just shards of glass and all of the leftovers. And I'm like, what a waste of food.
Who's going to be able to eat that? Nobody.
Nobody.
That's not safe.
Nobody can eat it. You can't get all the glass out.
Frank is the best cook on the island.
Dude, I want a Frank. Can I just have a chef? You know?
I love a Frank. Ugh.
So it's the next morning, and it's marriage times.
Murdoch walks her down the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sweet. There's no music.
No,
There's
it's just dead silent in this musty old church that it's not even the priest of that church. It's from a different church because nobody uses this church in this place. And she makes a note that she's really glad that this is a Christian ceremony and not the ancient one that she and Dugan did, because this is different.
Oh my God. Also, the one thing we forgot to tell them about the scene before is that while she's in the bath, she says to herself, not even to him, this is the last thing he would have wanted. And Dorian says, I don't think that's true. Like, Dugan loved you. Dugan loved me. Don't you think he would have wanted us to know each other, to care for each other? And he's like, I promise that I will care for you. And she's like, oh, gosh, yeah, I guess so. And then that's one of the things that finally tips her over the edge, including him telling her that he will, in fact, get her pregnant. So now we're here. And one of my favorite things is that in between the priest saying, like, do you take this woman to be your wedded wife? In her inner monologue, it says, you're blood of my blood and bone of my bone. And so she's sort of stitching these two wedding ceremonies together in her mind as it's happening. And it's beautiful,
Then
frankly.
they have an incredibly chaste kiss, which is very important because they kiss. And she is the one who initiates, and he...
That's Dorian's reaction. That is essentially Dorian's reaction.
I'm so sorry. That came out of nowhere. And I do not have the skills that you do to successfully mute myself. Wow. So anyway, no, Dorian's reaction is he just stands there. He doesn't move away first, which is super important. He just stays there. And it's wonderful. And now it's the wedding night.
Oh.
She's been anxiously waiting at the bed. First she's like draw me like one of your French girls on
She's
the bed.
trying to make herself ready. Whatever the fuck that means.
Puts up, closes the blinds and turns on some candles. And
she's like, maybe the warm light will do good things.
And then she's sitting on the bed. And then finally she's like, God damn it, I'm going after him.
Yeah.
What the fuck? And turns out he has been standing on the other side of that door, holding onto the door handle for the last hour.
What?
Trying to get up the gumption to go inside.
I do not remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's just standing there just waiting. Maybe it wasn't an hour, but it was a long time.
Yeah. Anyway, so they both open the door at the same time. And she says, where have you been? While he says, where are you going?
And then he sits down in a chair and he tells her to take off her dress.
And she says, well, I thought that you would want to do that. And he says, if I had wanted to, I would have ripped it off your body already. No, I'm telling you to take off your dress. And she says, oh, that's right. You like to watch.
Uh-huh. And then when she's about to drop her bloomers, he's like, turn around. And she's like, what? Okay. And so she turns around so he can see her ass.
Yeah.
And then she bends over and slowly wiggles them down. And the entire time he is sitting there cutting holes in the fucking armchair arms.
He's losing his mind.
because he's so horny. He literally waxes poetic about her body and specifically her butt for like a solid 10 pages.
Yeah.
Just talking about how beautiful she is. And then he's like, okay, lay down on the edge of the bed and spread your legs. And she's like, and then she does.
And meanwhile, like, I don't know that I would be capable of this. Period. You know what I mean? Like I just need listener to know that up until this point, he has basically acted as if she repulses him. You know, like all the messaging she's gotten is, I'm not going to touch you. I can't stand it.
I couldn't. Period.
I don't think so. And
she, throughout this book, has talked. She's like, I can see the fire behind his eyes, and I can blah blah this
I
and
would
that.
not
And
be
I'm
able
like,
to. Not this guy.
No.
And meanwhile, like in this scene specifically, I don't know if you have the quote, but she says something like, seducing a husband without any of the reassuring kisses or touches or anything else is like an incredibly harrowing experience. This woman, between standing up in the bathtub to be like, are you sure you don't want all of this? And then for the very first time, like she just got her first tingle while using the soap on herself in the bathtub yesterday. And to go from very first tingle in her nethers to I'm going to lay splayed
fingering
open.
herself in front of him.
Splayed open on the bed, fingering
Because he
herself.
tells her, you need to be wet for what comes next.
And she's like, what does that mean? And he says, pleasure. Pleasure.
That's exactly what he does. He's like he can only get out single words at this point because he is so horned up. So she is touching herself, and then she fingers herself and pulls up some of that wetness to her clit, and he is a panther unleashed.
He pounces, lunges for her.
His will snaps, and then he says, Farah met his wounded gaze with absolute conviction. I want you to take me. Then God help us both. And then he is macking hard on her, and they're having this amazing kiss, and he pulls away, and she says, Dorian, and he says, don't call me that. Not here.
Not
and she's like,
here.
what do I call you then? And he says, husband.
Husband, because she
How
can't
did I not
call
know?
him Dugan, Sabrina.
How did I not know?
He cannot ask her to call him Dugan.
How did I not know when he said, don't call me Dorian, not here, in this wistful
Not
time
in our
of
marital
intimacy.
bed. So then he finishes taking off her corset. And when he does, or like her chemise or something, and then in between her corset and her chemise, he finds the plaid that Dugan gave to her. It's the Mackenzie plaid, and he gave it to her, and she promised him that she would never be without it when they were children. It was like his wedding gift to her. Yeah.
How is that plaid recognizable after being against your skin for 17 years?
Well, it is.
Do you know
good
how
quality?
much skin oils fuck with
different
fabric?
pigments? Yeah.
I was like, this wouldn't even be recognized if it is anything more than gossamer against her skin. The color, there's no way the color is still there. There's no pattern left.
Well, if it hasn't touched light in forever, maybe the pigment is still there.
I guess you are not somebody who's gone down the rabbit hole of how much the human body does not like things.
Body. I know.
The human body is like, I want to be naked
against it.
Like,
true.
we are terrible for all of everything that you love, listener. It will disintegrate off of your body if you go long enough. Like, so
true.
anyway,
well, and then
he
she says, please don't be mad at me. She says, are you mad? And he says, no, why would I be mad? And she says, I promised I would never be without it. And he says, well, now maybe it can represent both me and him because he's the one that binds us. Ooh!
Yeah. So then he makes her come by just grinding against her.
He does a dry hump on her, but is it a dry hump? You know what I mean? Because like she's not.
This is a wet hump.
This is a moist hump at the very least.
She makes a comment about his. She's like, "Your pants are wet," and he's like, "It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine." Pleasure. So then, on a less lighthearted note, she does accidentally reach for him.
Not yet.
And he...
Nope. Because after he dry humps her to completion, then he says, I need to find out what you taste like. I'm addicted to you. And then he goes down on her. And that is when
That's not the order.
No? Does he tie her up before he goes down on her?
Yeah. So my note exactly is when he makes her come by grinding on her, she accidentally reaches for him and he jumps away. Then he takes her and ties her hands to the headboard with his necktie and also the plaid. And he says, I told you not to reach for me. After tying her up, he makes his way down her and tells her not to say a single word. And then he goes down on her like a champ and finger fucks her with his gloved hands.
With his leather gloves on.
Why is that so hot?
Why is that so hot, but also so weird? Like, I don't know. I can't decide.
All I know is that when I was reading it, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, you are.
Oh, no.
Go, dude. Like,
yes. He's been tweaking those nipples with his gloves. Like, that was one of the things, is that he would wear gloves. So wait, the other thing is that when he goes down on her, he tells her not to say anything specifically because he wouldn't be able to handle it if she rejected him. If he did something wrong, like if she like rejected him, like changed her mind or whatever. And so he's like, I'm just not going to give her the opportunity to hurt my feelings like that because everyone hurts my feelings.
Oh my God, you Sebastian. Luckily for him, she has no interest in stopping this.
No.
So, wow, there's some full penetration and it's hot and it's horny and she comes again. He comes twice. And boy, they are just having a good time of it.
Well, before he penetrates her, he whispers in her ear, I didn't want to hurt you, ever. And then he plunges in. He says, I'm sorry. And then, here we go.
So there's been this huge, like, cosmological shift in both of their lives, you know?
And she says, stay. She says, don't leave. And he says, I have to go. And in his mind, it's for her safety more than anything else because he has nightmares.
And he's also being an emo little fuck, though, about the fact that he came in her twice and now she's going to be disgusted by him and the bindings and she's going to hate me and this is awful and oh my God. And so he goes scurrying off. And then when he leaves, he tells himself that he is a bloody fool, a fool to think that he was strong. He had an evident fucking weakness, one with liquid gray eyes and silver curls, and God help him if she ever found out. And it's like, when has she not been your weakness?
Been all in. Right,
Dorian.
Right.
What?
Well, I mean, Sabrina, he just met her. You know what I mean? So. Anyway, so wait. And then he leaves her naked and still tied with one hand. Okay. One hand he undoes, and then he's like, she can undo the rest of it. I have to go.
He just runs.
And Murdoch wakes up goes to wake her up in the morning, and she is naked and splayed out and tied to the headboard. And he's just like, I don't care how much I'm loyal to him. When I see him again, I will wreck him. And she says, Murdoch, he didn't do anything that I didn't want him to do, basically.
It was beautiful. I love being tied up and railed within an inch of my life. Which,
that's why they're perfect
that's a mood.
for each other. Yeah.
Can you imagine if Farrah lived nowadays? She would be the kinkiest motherfucker on the planet. She'd be down for anything. Dorian would be like, do you want to try blank? And she'd be like, let's fucking go.
Let's do it. I'll try anything once.
So it's time to go.
Yeah, now they're going back to London because she needs to reclaim her earldom or whatever. So When on the train ride there, we find everything that happened with Farah during those 17 years.
Yes.
This is when they find out that she like stowed away on her fiance's carriage. He like goes to get her because he's been warned that she had this emotional connection
escape
to this other child. And then she was going to run away. And so she hides out until he's leaving and then just hitches a ride on the back of his carriage. And she ends up having to like go all over the country. And she thankfully is given a lot of kindness by strangers until finally she shows up at a Mackenzie's house. And they're like, you must be a relation. Come on in. You can be our other daughter now. You can help us with the deliveries. You can do all the business. And that's why she ends up being able to deliver food and stuff to Newgate Castle for those 7 years. And then after that, she ends up working at Scotland Yard. As a maid, right? And then she becomes indispensable to the first chief inspector that was there before Morley.
Because he has trouble reading under low light, and so she was helping him.
Yeah. And then after a while, he was like, you're not a maid anymore. You're my right-hand gal, all right? And then she just kept the job for the next 10 years. So they're like, oh my God, you were under our nose the whole time, and all Dorian would have had to do is the one thing he swore he never would, and that was get arrested. So they go to a modiste, get her a whole new wardrobe. She gets a little jealous because she thinks like maybe the modiste knows more and is like a little bit too familiar with Dorian than she would prefer.
And he's like, well, her husband.
Yeah, I've known her husband for years. And she's like, okay, I guess I can like this lady still.
Well, and then the lady brings out lingerie and she's like, oh, I don't need that. And Dorian's like, yeah, you do.
I want one of everything.
Dorian, what? And she's like, you can't spend a small fortune on under things. And he's like, well, luckily, I have a small fortune to spend on under things.
Oh, and this is highly mixed messages because the one thing I forgot to tell you about the train ride is that he was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I think I'm going to take this chaise lounge instead of taking your chair. And he's like, is it because you can't sit? She's like, what? No.
She's like, I have a corset, dude.
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, I really enjoyed, whatever. And he's like, well, you might be pregnant, so it might be a moot point. And she's like, even if I'm pregnant, like I enjoyed it, you enjoyed it. Why can't we want to keep on? And he's like,
no, I'm dirty, I'm filthy, I'm disgusting.
I can't do it to you. I'm tainted. So after that, at the modiste, she realizes that right before she got kidnapped, like the next morning, she was supposed to go help Gemma. And so she starts crying and she looks at him and she says, Dorian, I need your help. And Dorian has never been more turned on in his whole life than when his lady wife puts down her boundaries and says, I need your help. Oh.
And then we zippy zap down to the dock.
Yikes.
And we have the delight of meeting the sexiest motherfucker around by the name of Christopher Argent.
He gets a book, right?
Of fucking course he gets a book. I think he's the next book, if I remember right. And I'm just going to say, there is not a single hero in this series that I was not obsessed with.
Yeah. Wait, does Murdoch get a book?
No.
Come on. Murdoch and the Footman don't get a book? Not even a novella?
Not as far as I know.
Come on. Kerrigan, Byrne.
I know.
I mean, I guess I'm glad they got the HEA, but god damn it. Do Frank and the other person that he might end up with get a book?
No.
Oh, I would have bought that book too.
You'll understand why, though, with the way that all of the people who are tied together, like the way that all of the heroes are tied together in the series, it makes sense.
Is it that most of them were imprisoned at Newgate Castle? Because Murdoch and Frank would definitely
I understand,
apply.
But they're also sweet little baby angels.
All right, fair enough.
There's not a single sweet baby angel hero in any of these books.
They're all baddie bad boys.
They're all Sebastians. They're all broody
Even
and
Morley,
broken.
Morley doesn't have that much to be upset
Morley is the first book in the next series, if I
in the
remember right.
spinoff. Okay,
In the spinoff,
got it.
which the spinoff series it's called Good Girls, and it is way fluffier. It's way lighter. It's delightful. It's a romp. It's fantastic, and it is honestly shocking. Let me say, do not go into Good Girls expecting Victorian rebels. Because you're not they're two completely different vibes. It's walking out of a haunted house into a frolicking field of pixies.
Love it. Okay.
So they're walking down the dock in the seedy underbelly of London, and Dorian is already regretting letting Farah convince him for her to come along. Mm-hmm. He's like, I should have just kidnapped all of the dock workers that I found, all of the dock walkers that I found, and brought them to her and let her choose from there. So they find Gemma, and she's down at this dock. This little boy was with her, but he has disappeared off into the mist. And they're like, okay, he's definitely going to go let somebody know that we're here. Yeah. But one of
Gemma's
my favorite quotes.
To hell.
Yes, it's very, very
Gemma's
sad.
Gemma's whole face is messed up.
Yes, it is very sad.
But you've got a great quote. Lay it on us.
Yeah, because it made me laugh. Because Farah walks up and she says, it's Mrs. Blackwell now. And Gemma says, as in Dorian Blackwell? If you're married to the Blackheart of Benmore, I'm the bloody Duchess of York. And then Dorian walks up and bows and says, Your Grace. And it's one of the best things I've ever read in my life. And of course, Gemma's like, oh my God,
holy
wow.
fuckballs. Yeah.
What the fuck? And then Druthers comes out of nowhere with 3 of his little henchmen. Mm-hmm. And they've all got weapons. And they're all
and they're fixing to fight no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, nothing will elevate my criminal status other than taking out the king. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and murder you right in the face right now. Mm-hmm. And Dorian's like, I don't know about that because, he sends the ladies behind some crates. Mm-hmm. And he's like, hide. There are 3 dudes plus Druthers. Mm-hmm. One of the dudes is like big and giant and behind Druthers. And so he has 2 knives hidden in scabbards at the base of his back under his coat and stuff. And so as one of the guys comes toward him and flicks his arm out with a knife.
Stabby.
Yeah, he does a slash at him. Dorian ducks and then comes back up, pulling out both knives. And he slashes this guy in the armpit of his knife-wielding hand and then does something else
right
to totally
through his throat.
Right through his throat is the one. That guy's done.
It was so sexy.
It was hot. Then another guy materializes, and then he sees a shock of brown hair come out of nowhere. And then the biggest guy goes stumbling backwards into the shadows behind
Druthers. And Dorian is like, at the end of Argent's famous garrote.
Yeah, victim of his famous garrote.
Mel, I need you.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm going to read all of these.
I need you to, because it gets so much more convoluted and crazy. It's just...
Yeah, I'm stoked about it.
This is one of my favorite historical series of all time.
Oh.
I will scream about this series until I am dead.
Love it. I love it. So anyway, so then he takes out the other guy, and then Druthers is like, oh, you're not going to get past my shadow of a mountain over here. And Dorian's like, I'm sorry, what? What shadow?
You're who?
What mountain? Do you want to turn around and see if that guy's still there?
My favorite thing is that Murdoch is here, but there's no talk about what Murdoch is doing. So I'm just imagining him holding his pistols I'm ready. No. I'll shoot you if I need to.
Tag me in, coach.
Tag me in, bud.
Yeah, no, I think he's standing near the women, to be the last line of defense or something great.
I can see that. So then he's about to fully stab the shit out of Murdoch. Nope.
Yeah.
Druthers. Not Murdoch.
Dorian. Yeah.
And he gets stopped
Druthers
by
pulls
Farah.
out a gun. No. Okay, wait. Druthers pulls out a gun. There's a whole thing. He ends up incapacitating him with his knife somehow. Druthers is on the ground. He's about to do the killing blow I guess. And then that's when Farrah Lee comes out of the mist and she's like, no, you can't. And he's like, Farrah, what are you talking about? This is what I do. And she's like, no, everything else was self-defense, but this would be murder.
He's an unarmed man. You don't want this mark on your soul. And so instead what he does is he does incapacitate his druthers' weapon hand. And he's like, what's another little smudge?
Yeah,
I'll leave him alive.
Fully severs a tendon so that he can never wield a knife or a gun again.
Oh my God, it hurts so bad just to think about.
I know, right?
And then guess who comes walking down the dock? If it ain't Sir fucking Morley.
Chief
Witnessing
Inspector
everything.
Morley is here with his entire squadron. And he's like, I've finally got you now. I've got you on murder, and I've got you on smuggling, and I've got you on trafficking, maybe even because of that dock worker that's right there. So he takes him in. He puts Murdoch and Dorian in a very small, dank cell, which, of course, they're both having big anxiety PTSD reactions to. And then he's got Gemma.
By the way, listener, none of that is on page.
What? Yes, it is.
It is Farrah saying, I'll bet that they couldn't handle it.
And she's right.
She's
They're not well about it.
It's never stated on page that they're bad about it.
Whatever, man. I was with Farrah on this one. So then he's in the office with Farrah and Gemma, and he's like, explain this to me now. And he's holding her marriage certificate.
I will say one thing. I don't think that Dorian was concerned about what was happening to him, as we find out later in the book.
No, absolutely.
He's significantly more concerned about what's happening in this office.
Yeah, he's really worried about Farrah being alone with Chief Inspector Morley. Wait, a listener, we have done a huge oversight on you, and I am so sorry. Remember when I told you that Murdoch said that she is in danger, but the danger can't touch her in the castle? Turns out that Sir Wollington, or whatever his name is, the old fiance, he is now married to that alleged amnesiac and is claiming the fortune of the earldom of Torringtown and Northbang. Is that the one? Doesn't matter. And so anyway, the reason that Dorian found out that Farrah is Farrah is that Sir Wollingtown told everybody, no, Steward Warrington. I don't know his name.
You got it. I'm so proud
Was
of
it
you.
Warrington?
Yes.
Oh, great job, Melody. So the Warrington guy, not Wellington, notably, has put a hit out on her, and Dorian accepted the contract in order to protect her. So that is the big danger, is that Warrington is trying to kill her dead so that she can't contest the amnesiac coming forward and claiming the fortune. Why are you looking at me like I have three heads?
No, it's fine. Keep going.
Did I say something wrong?
I did not realize that he accepted the contract. I knew that Argent was approached with the contract and that's how he knew about it, but I didn't realize that he had accepted it to keep it off.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
Who gives
matter.
a fuck? Whimsy the shit out of it.
Nobody would have done it to her had they accepted it and they were in his camp.
Doesn't matter.
That's the big danger. And so she's explaining to, oh no, Chief Inspector Morley. There are so many names.
And they're old-timey names, too.
So many England Times names. So she's explaining to Chief Inspector Morley that she was in grave danger, and the only way that really she could protect herself was to get married to the most notorious, most dangerous criminal in all of Christendom, maybe. Mm-hmm. And Chief Inspector Morley is like, I'm sorry, am I chopped liver?
Is he the most dangerous person in Christendom?
Methinks maybe not.
Anyway, it's fine.
Somebody's even more dangerous.
All right, so
Anyway, so he's really mad, and he's like, don't you think you could have come to me and I would have married you on the spot and protected you with the full force of Scotland Yard? And she's like, yeah, but like, also, no, it's different. And you don't excite my nethers the way that he does.
Well, and he looks at her and he's like, do you love him?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, but I don't love you either.
Right.
Which,
exactly.
like, you know what, Farrah? You are correct.
Good for you.
So
Gemma leaves the room.
Well, importantly,
Yeah.
when Gemma's in the room, he's like, what do you mean you're the Townsend heir? There's that woman and blah, blah. And Gemma's like, ha! Are you fucking kidding? That's Lucy Boggs. She's a whore down on the docks. And Morley's like, oh. And nobody's going to listen to the madam.
Bunch of poor sex workers.
And all of those dock walkers. Like, they're not going to take your word for it. So then Gemma does leave. And I love that Gemma brings it up. She's like, we were all planning on blackmailing the shit out of her.
For sure.
Which, like, you know what? Good for you, Gemma.
Yeah.
Get yours.
Absolutely.
So she is now out of the room. And he's basically like, what can I do to help you now, though? Like, I have the records office that I can get information from. And she's like, well, and he's
sure
like,
he's got that
is that why he got arrested? What the fuck? He realizes that he got played hard. Like, real hard. So then Morley looks her dead in the face and he's like, so Madam Regina, you know, the place that Lucy Boggs came from, you should talk to the owner. You know them intimately. And she's like, I've never met Madam Regina in my life. And he's like,
that's the proprietor, not the owner.
Yep. Turns out the owner is Dorian. And I'm like, of course he is. In what world is he not? So they are... Oh my God, Dorian, you are such a little drama queen. So they're in the carriage on the way home and she's talking about, she's like, oh, aren't you happy that I got you set free so quickly from the, you know, the underground dungeon? And Dorian's like, and just like opens the door to the carriage and goes launching off before it even stops and just goes storming off into the fucking mist, not to be seen again until the next day. And she's like, what just happened? And Murdoch is like, he gets in a mood sometimes. It's fine.
This is regular Dorian stuff.
We end up zippy zapping to the court, and we're just going to cruise through this because there's still a decent amount in the book left. So they are at the court. They walk in. Warrington's a real big angry about it. There's this new chief justice that she recognizes, and she's like, oh, I remember you on your 30th birthday when I was 5 years old. You shared a slice of spice cake with me. And everyone's like, well, how do we know that you're the real Duchess or whatever town
Countess of North Bang?
Yep, that one. And that one justice is like, I have a question for the two of you, and I'll know the answer.
This was so mean.
They both walk up to him and he says, for your birthday, when I shared the spice cake, what did I give you for your birthday? I'll give you a hint. It was in a music box with a ballerina because I know how much you love ballerinas. And Lucy Boggs is like, oh, well, it was a trinket, maybe a necklace. I'm so sorry.
Maybe a bracelet. I got hit in the head.
I can't
really hard.
remember. And it was just so foggy as a 5-year-old. And
meanwhile, Farrah is having a full-on meltdown because she's like, I could answer anything but this. She's like, tears are rolling down her face.
I have no idea what was in that thing. I don't remember getting it.
She says, I'm so sorry. I don't remember this. And also, I was the tomboy. My sister is the one who loved ballerinas. And I was more into, and he says, Pegasus. It was a trick question. The reason I shared my spice cake with you is because I didn't get you a present that year.
Dick.
It's so mean.
Like, what the fuck?
So mean.
But it worked out. And so he's like, we're going to get this all figured out. And then it's all taken care of. Warrington gets arrested because he can't keep his trap shut. And now he's arrested specifically because of the fact that he tried to bribe or pay Argent and McTavish to kill her.
Yeah.
Which, like, McTavish ain't taking that, even without Dorian in the picture.
No. And they fight, like, one of the things
Argent would, just to be clear.
Not her.
Not in this situation, but he would
otherwise, sure. But
boy,
like not,
he's such an assassin.
He's not going to go against Dorian's love. You know what I mean? He's got loyalty. I'm sure of it. Anyway, so 2 things that we find out. They bring in that nurse, that Sister Maggot to like.
And now she's Mother Superior.
Yeah, of course she is. And she admits to forging the documents and all that kind of thing. But then the other thing we find out is that if you're not blue-blooded already, you cannot claim any of the benefits of being a countess's husband. So you can be a steward of the land that they own. You get access to all the purse strings. You get all of that, but you don't get a seat in Parliament. You don't get whatever, benefits to like the clubs or whatever that you would get if you were like a real earl. And then she thought he was doing this the whole time because he wanted to be an earl and he told her that.
Because that's what he said.
Yeah, he was like, I want to have some entitled benefits or whatever. She finds out he doesn't even get that, and so he's done all of this just to return her legacy to her.
So my cheeks hurt from smiling so much.
I know.
So we zippy zap, and Dorian is like doing that brooding thing where he's looking out a window. He has a hand up on it while he's looking broodingly out into the fields.
It's probably raining even.
He's feeling so low. He's like, what do I do from here? Where do I go from here? What do I conquer? What power can I get? Because like there's nothing I can do. I've hit the peak and I've never felt so low.
I'm just so successful and they haven't gotten the ability to send me to space yet.
So she ends up coming into the solarium behind him and she's like, can we celebrate? This was amazing. And he's like, go take care of your land. And she's like, but what? And he's like, I'm not coming with you. Go. And she's like trying to apologize. She's like, what have I done? I'm so sorry. And then she she grabs him by the arm and he spins around and grabs her wrist.
Oh my God.
And without gloves on.
Yeah.
And he's like, how many times do I have to tell you not to reach for me? And then he realizes that the first time he touched her skin to skin was with violence. Oh God, this is just reiterating,
reinforcing.
Yeah. All of these ideas that he's not good enough for her and he's dirty and
he's
awful and terrible. And then he looks her in the face and he's like, did you touch Morley in that room? And she's like,
God.
No,
like, what?
I touched his face and I gave him a hug, but like nothing more than that. And he's like, you're mine. And he's just the most jealous son of a bitch.
I am. That's what I've been trying to do right now.
And then he loses it and he kisses the hell out of her. And then he fucking grabs a rope out of nowhere and ties up her wrist and then hangs her by the window and then pulls her dress up and rails her senseless.
And she is into it.
He bent over her, the width of his shoulders engulfing the slimness of hers. I'm like this all the bloody time around you. I hate it. Do you know that? I have no control. I just want to fuck and fuck and fuck until nothing matters anymore. Until we can no longer move our limbs or lift our heads to eat. He flexed his still hard cock inside of her. This is supposed to go away after I come, but it doesn't. Not with you, wife. My passion is this insatiable perversion. Sir, by the way, I was thinking about it while I was highlighting these quotes.
Yeah.
What was the book that I couldn't even read? I was too a Twitter to read the sex scene. What was that again?
That just for the cameras?
Was it just for the cameras? Okay. Where I was like, I can't say this out loud. Yeah. Okay. It made me laugh because when I was highlighting this, I was like, yeah, I'll have no problem saying that out loud.
This is no problem.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and then he's growling in her ear and he says, fairy, my fairy.
And then she freezes.
And then she says, Dugan? and he freaks out.
He fucking vanishes, and no, she is half naked, tied to the window, and Murdoch comes in again because this man is incapable of not walking in on her tied up in sexual positions.
Let's be clear, when we say vanishes, she means that Farah can hear him destroying the house all the way out into
What a moody little bitch.
He's just like clang, clash, brah.
And Murdoch's
so
like,
Murdoch
what the
comes
hell
in
is
being
happening?
like, are you okay? And he's like, he did this to you again? And she's like, Murdoch, don't worry about it. I liked it again. Let me go. And then she says, did you know that it's Dugan? And Murdoch was like, what? No, what? She's like,
well, no. So what happens is he says, I'm never going to forgive him. And she's like, you're going to forgive him the same way I'm going to forgive you.
That's the one.
Did you know? And he's like, no, I would never. And then she's like, where'd he go? And he's like, I don't think you're going to have a problem finding that.
Yeah, just follow the destruction. And she says, don't follow me. She's so excited. She's going to go get her Dugan.
She finds him out by a stone wall in the rain, just with his head hung between his knees and his hands.
And she says, why are you crying? It's the first words she ever said to him.
And he says, go away.
Go away. I can't with you. Then shit goes from great
banana
to hell.
Sideways. Yeah. So she is talking to him and she's like, Dugan, talk to me. And then he says to her, the boy you knew as Dugan Mackenzie is deceased. He died in Newgate prison too many times. And she says, is there nothing left of him? And he says, only the way he remembers you. Oh. And he's like playing with her curls the way that Dugan always did.
Yeah, it's the first time he's allowed himself to do that.
Well, then they have this really beautiful kiss, and he is embracing her, and she's embracing him.
Should we tell listener what happened really quickly?
Oh, God.
In Newgate Castle? Okay, so basically what happened was Dugan had... So this orphanage was well known for being full of bastard children of gentry.
Oh, are you talking about how he died?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 seconds. That's the next thing.
Oh, that's the next thing? Okay.
Yeah. So they end up having this really beautiful kiss, and he's embracing her, and she's embracing him, and she says, like a fucking nitwit, she says, I love you, Dugan. And he pulls away from her, and he says, my name is Dorian Blackwell, and I will be him until the day that I die. And then he tells her the story of what happened and how Dugan's father paid to have him killed.
Yeah, Dugan wrote to his father for help. And instead, his father was like, I'm not going to let this be a stain on my family name. And so he paid 3 of the guards to kill his son in the prison. And this was well into their friendship and well into like the boys all being friends together. And they were working on some sort of scheme. And Frank used to be like a brilliant mathematician and code breaker. And he was just like so smart. And so one night he and Dorian were working on a cipher of some sort or something like that.
Yeah.
And so because of that, Dugan and Dorian switched rooms. And up until this point, they had been called the Blackheart Brothers because they were tough to tell apart, especially when they were constantly covered in soot and grime and grossness to protect their skin from the harsh rays of the sun while they were like building the railroad during the day.
Just make it more depressing. It's fine.
I know. And so the 3 guards go into Dugan and Frank's room and proceed to beat both children, one to death and one to very, 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 very near death and, you know, debilitating results for the rest of his life. And Dugan then decided with the rest of the boys that he would take Dorian's name and Dorian's sentence because Dorian was going to get out pretty soon regardless. His sentence was almost up. He wasn't in there for murder. He was in there for like robbery
stealing
or something.
bread.
Yeah. So that's when Dugan became Dorian. And, it's just like tragic and terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And poor Frank. Frank's just been gaslit since
Justice for Frank.
Justice for Frank. Frank gets some justice. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, he does. So then Dorian, he says, I am Dorian Blackwell. I will always be Dorian Blackwell. He lives on in me. And she says, then I'll love you as Dorian Blackwell.
Yeah.
For I married him as well. And then he gets a stick up his butt.
What a dumbass.
And he says, don't love me because I'm not going to be able to love you in return. And she says, it's too late. I already gave you my love. Yeah. And he's like, you gave it to Dugan. Nope. And she's like, yeah, but guess what? Dorian had started to steal it from me. And he's like, take it back.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you give me your heart, I'm going to corrupt it. It's going to be poisoned. I'm going to blacken it until you hate me as much as you hate yourself for giving it to me. Every part of my life has been bleak, brutal, and bloody, except you. I'll not add your ruin to my many sins. And then he totally calls her out because he's like, you think that your love is going to fix me? Because that's exactly what she was thinking too, and she knew it. She's like, fuck. Yeah. And like, obviously we know that her love is gonna fix him. But like, he's being a big old dick about it. He's like,
no, he's being terrible.
Oh God. And he says, I am a bad man and you just make me worse. Yes. Because there is no better man under this. In fact, with you here, I'm much worse. I lose control around you, Farah. You make me blind. The thought of touching you dissolves me into madness. The thought of another man touching you? He grabbed her wrists and held the raw skin in front of her eyes. Look what I've done. What I forced you to do upstairs. And she's like, you didn't force me. I wanted it.
I enjoyed it.
Well, and then he's like, I would have. And she's like, you can't have. Yeah. And she's like, what the fuck, dude? I'm never going to deny you. I want you. Every piece of you. All of these dark, bad, broken parts.
Yes, I want you. I love you. I am yours. And you're mine.
Yeah. And then he says, well, consider this done. And she's like, well, you promised me a child, though. Mm-hmm. And he says, consider this the first of many times that I'll disappoint you. And she said, but you said that you always keep your promises. And he said, I was wrong to say that. And she said, why? And then he said, as I said before, I do not suffer fools. And you're a fool for loving me.
Oof. Ugh,
and then as he goes stomping off back towards the building, she's like, what was even the point of marrying me? Why did you bind my life to yours if you're going to treat me like this?
Yeah.
And he says, or she says, what's the bloody point? And he says, the point is I'm a bastard in every sense of the word.
Yikes.
Boom. Mic drop. That's it.
She goes off to her family home, her newly remembered and reclaimed Townsend estate or whatever. She takes all of his men.
All of his men.
Murdoch goes. That footman goes. Frank goes.
Frank goes. Gemma's there.
Goes.
Tallow goes. The footman.
Yeah.
/ butler. And, gosh.
2 months go by. 2 of them. There is one moment that I really thought captured something very, very real. And that was, we spoke about how he was the victim as a child to the R word many times over in prison. And one of the reasons that he hasn't wanted to touch her after being able to consummate the marriage is because he sees himself as like dirty and tainted and all of the things that victims of sexual assault often feel.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just thought it was very poignant and
it was very real.
Yeah.
And
anyway, what
frankly,
were you going to
hard
say?
to read.
Yes.
In a couple of quite a few places.
Yeah.
So she's talking to Murdoch And she says, well, I've been given another chance at happiness and I refuse to throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to take back that promise and I am moving forward with my life. And I'm going to write Dorian a letter.
Yeah.
By the way, she has been having these on and off moments where she's like, I'm taking back my joy. I'm taking back my life. And this has galvanized Murdoch into confessing to Tallow his feelings.
Yeah.
And now Tallow and Murdoch are together forever.
And it's really cute because we find out before she makes this proclamation that, like, for the past 2 months, she has been watching and being very happy for Murdoch and Tallow, because before he even told her anything, she noticed, like, the small touches here and there and, you know, like touching each other on the shoulder or something as they passed and looks between them and all this stuff. And then she walks into the kitchen and Frank has his arms around Gemma's waist from behind and is looking over her shoulder as she works on some sort of pastry dough or something.
And in that moment, like, my heart grew 3 times.
Exploded everywhere. There was heart confetti all around me in the garden. It was a disaster. And she's being like, I'm not good at this. I'm no good at this. And he's just standing over her going, no, you are good at this. You're doing a great job. And she says that, like, their relationship is so perfect and buoying to everyone, but specifically, like, for Gemma, it's because Frank allows her to make a lot of the decisions. And what Gemma needs in her life is control over her own fate.
And he's there to support her.
And he is just steadfast and sweet and worshipful. And she treats him just as well because, you know, it's just like such a mutually beneficial and
it's so sweet,
wonderful relationship.
I would kill for those novellas.
I mean, I would die for those novellas.
I would
at this
not,
point,
because I need to be alive for it to be able to read them, you know?
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I would have to pay my debt after I read them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So then she does decide.
She writes him a letter.
And we don't know what that letter is. And so we zippy zap to Dorian. He's getting drunk as a skunk with Arjun.
He's a wreck.
He has not been eating. He's not been sleeping. He's just, boy, he's looking rough.
Argent has told him that Warrington was arrested but then released on his own recognizance.
But then they found him dead.
Yes. Then they found his
they're
body
like,
in
awesome,
the Thames.
we don't need to worry about him. And then Dorian gets a letter.
Oh, boy.
And he opens that letter. And let me tell you what that letter says. Dorian, I've given our situation a great deal of consideration and have decided to subsequently release you from your promise. My intention to raise a family still remains. As such, I will be accepting another candidate to fulfill the required vocation until my objective has been attained. It is my sincere hope that this letter finds you well and that you are able to find peace. Yours, Lady Farrelly Blackwell, Countess Northwalk. And he is mad.
He goes from 0 to get my coat and my horse. I'm going to ride through the night.
He gets on his thoroughbred and he goes.
Well, then we zippy zap back and, like, shit goes sideways. Murdoch goes in to, like, get her, you know, bring her tea or whatever she needs at night. No.
So she's in lingerie. And she's in front of a mirror and she's like admiring how it looks. And she's thinking all about how much she wishes that Dorian was here to witness it and like love her at it. And she's talking about these
how
things.
hard it's going to be to let another man into her bed, even though she has to because she wants a family. Gosh darn it.
And then she sees a shadow behind her.
That's the one
thing. And she's like, Dorian? And now all of a sudden Warrington pops up and he's like, you still think that fool is going to be here for you, you strumpet. And
he's got lesions all over his face.
Oh boy, he's looking rough.
He's obviously off his rocker a bit.
Yeah, he is fully syphilitic, my friends.
That's the one.
So he's like, all right, time to go. And Murdoch is outside of her door to bring her tea.
That's the one.
And she's like, I've already turned in. and he says, like, I have news from Argent about Dorian, and she's like, it doesn't matter, and she says
I don't
want to
know anything about Dorian.
That she's hoping says, hey, we have some problems. And then all of a sudden, Murdoch comes through that door like a angry rhinoceros.
He
blows that bitch right off those hinges.
That's the one. And then he gets shot.
Warrington straight up just shoots him immediately.
And then pushes her through her own wardrobe. He, Lion the Witch in the Wardrobes her down into the bowels of that castle.
Can I tell you?
Yes.
I used to have nightmares about finding out that there were secret passageways in places that I live, because my biggest terror is that there would be somebody hiding and living in the walls. So, like, this book... Another one that immediately pops into mind because y'all did it on HB's before I joined you as co-host, and Haley did it in our very first episode of TBR. With that
Scottish one with the
where he's
bows
got
and
the
arrows.
It's the one with the painting of him naked, maybe.
Oh yeah,
and he just comes busting out of that fucking wall. Every time I read any book like that, I rationally know that in my tiny house, it is impossible for somebody to be living in my walls or under my house, but that's still not enough.
Hey, Sabrina, it's really good that you don't watch TV, because there is a TV show all about what's called Froggers. And Froggers are actual people in the real world who end up like living in people's walls or attics or basements. And then there are crime shows about them. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That's a real thing. Don't Google it, maybe. Sabrina's not well.
I've gone down this rabbit hole more than once, you know.
About Froggers?
No, I didn't know that term. I hate that there's a term. I hate that it's so common that there's a term for it. I really, like, with every fiber of my being, feel that. But I have gone down that rabbit hole a couple of times where, like, social media videos, right, where they're like, they set up a camera because food went missing, and then you see somebody just crawl out of their attic and go dig around in their pantry. One of the things that made me happiest about the house that I have moved into.
Yeah. There's no attic?
Literally, there is an attic, but it is too small. Like, I would know. There's no way for you to get in the attic and out of the attic without me being aware of it. So there's a TV show, Froggers.
Yeah, I think it's Phroggers, Froggers.
You realize that I don't have the self-control necessary.
Not to Google?
Not to... What?
Was there a picture?
The first thing, I know that we're in the middle of recording. The first thing that came up when I searched this was that, and that's not the most terrifying picture I've ever seen in my life.
It's terrifying.
Oh my God.
I hate that. Oh, it's frogging. I'm sorry, frogging.
All I know is that was the worst thing I could have seen.
I hate that.
In my whole life.
I hate that so much.
So, turns out Warrington has been frogging.
He's a frogger.
God, this is awful. Why? Ugh, I have chills.
Oh, I'm itching now for no reason.
I'm like antsy now. So he takes her down there. She learns the story about how she was promised to Warrington because he cozied up to her dad and became indispensable to him.
Yeah, and like he convinced her dad that he would like love her even more than he
And
loved
cherish
him
her.
and the estate and murder, blah, blah. And it was all a ruse. It was all a lie. It was all a con.
Yeah. And then, unsurprisingly, we find out that Warrington got syphilis from the woman that he married, Lucy
From
Boggs.
Lucy Boggs. Yeah. Thank you, Lucy Boggs. Thank you for your service.
And luckily for Farrah, his dick don't work no more.
Yep.
The syphilis has already gotten to it, but
Yep.
unlucky for Farrah, he has decided that he is going to take her with him into this cold, dark grave, and they're going to die down here together.
Yeah, it turns out his trigger finger still works. So that's great.
Yeah, love
So
that.
he's about to shoot her. She like
Then we
pushes
zippy
his-
zap.
Yeah, we zippy. There's like a bang bang and then it's a zippy zap.
So Blackwell gets to the house, and everybody's a flutter, and he got there just in time. He got there minutes after all of this happened.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Where's my wife?" And he goes up and finds Murdoch.
Murdoch's like, "'Tis a flesh wound."
Murdoch's like, "No way that he could have gotten past me, because my God, I wish I had passed out. That would be so much better than what I'm dealing
Right?
with right now."
And Dorian
starts
just starts
losing his
breaking
brain.
in the fucking walls until he
Yes.
demolishes that wardrobe and finds the Heidi passage.
Well, because he hears that bang bang, and he's
Yeah.
like, "They're in the walls,"
yes.
which is horrifying.
So yeah, he descends into that Frogger land. And when he gets down there,
And then we zippy zap.
thankfully- Yeah, we zippy zap back. She has like moved his arm out of the way so that he can't hit her, and she gets the gun. And does she shoot him right now?
So she gets the gun, and he stands up, and she has the gun, and he starts
Yeah.
coming towards her, and she's like, "I don't want to have to do this." And then he keeps coming towards her, and then she shoots him in the sternum.
That's the one. Yeah.
And then Dorian, like the
gets there.
Dark Knight, comes
Yes.
fluttering in with his cape and lands
Yeah.
in the middle of them.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Give me the gun, Farrah."
I don't want
and
this
she's like,
smudge on your
"No."
soul.
Well, she's like, "No, don't take the gun. He's already going to die." And then Dorian just grabs the gun from her and double taps him in the face.
Yeah.
And then snuggles her up and starts making out with her against that wall.
Yeah. And then he says, "Oh, lady wife, you knew what you were doing with that letter." And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like, "You think I would let any other man have you or whatever? I'm here to put 18 babies in that belly if I need to." And she's like, "Really?" And then they're together forever. And Murdoch is fine. He was only grazed in the side. It was, in fact, a flesh wound. And everybody's together forever, and it's the best.
Well, and most importantly, when they get
Yes.
up there,
uh-huh.
she's like, "Let me touch you."
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's like, "Oh God, I don't know if I can." And she's like, "Let me give you pleasure the way you gave me pleasure." And then
Yeah.
she gets that shirt off, and she
Yeah.
is all horned up for that sexy, sexy body. And he's
Uh-huh.
like,
Because he didn't want her to see his body. He has scars everywhere.
Yes.
And she's like, "I don't care about your scars. I love you. They're
She doesn't
part of
give-
you. I don't,
she doesn't care
I
about
love
the scars. She's just touching on all that muscle moving around underneath that skin. And then she does give him a blowjob.
you." Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And he scoops her up, and it's really beautiful.
It is. And they're together forever, and it's the best. The end.
And it's wonderful.
All right, Sabrina, what is your lady love?
Well, I can tell you it's not frogging. I know what my lady love is. Yesterday, I asked some friends if we could just do some parallel play where we play video games at the same time on chat
Yeah.
and don't actually really talk a whole lot. And my lady love is turning that shit upside down and invoking one of my friend's special interests. And then I just sat there enthralled for 3 hours
Aw.
listening to them talk about their special interest.
I love
And it was
that.
incredible. So that's my lady love. When you don't want to be alone, but you don't have anyone in person that you can hang out with, just set up a hang where
Yeah.
you don't have to be doing anything with that person. It's just doing things at the same time with the
Yeah.
occasional comment about miscellaneous weird random things.
I love it. I love it.
What's your lady love?
Oh boy. I don't know how to put this into a lady love, but I'm going to try.
Is it plant thievery?
No, I mean, that is always a lady love.
Okay.
I'm a lady love. If you see a yarrow that you don't have, get yourself some of that yarrow.
Get you that yarrow.
Yeah. Maybe that should be my lady love. No, I'm going to try to do a realer lady love. I have not pulled back the curtain in a little bit, and I don't really even know. I'm having a hard time processing it myself at the moment, but I just am still not super okay on the mental health front. And we've talked about it at length together, you and I. And I think that's part of the lady love, is like, I know that I'm really, really lucky to have the support that I do, especially since when my mental health goes south, the first thing I do is hermit, And some really incredible friends have reached out and been like, hey, I'm checking in. And I've had to be like, hi, I'm hermiting hard and I'm trying not to. And I'm also trying not to beat myself up about it. And like, it's a whole thing, right? But the other night, I told you about this briefly. The other night, for the first time in a while, I woke up just sobbing my head off. And Michael woke me up to be like, hey, it's a dream. Are you okay? Are you okay? And I just couldn't stop crying in the middle of the night. I was like, okay, I have to pee. So I went to go pee.
I can't believe you had fluids left to pee.
I know,
Proud of
right?
you.
Thank you. Well, I managed to pee and sob at the same time.
Gotta have it coming out both ends.
On that
You know?
toilet. Still not even sure what I was crying about. You know what I mean? And then I went back to...
Boy, do I understand you, Melody. Woo!
Yahoo! Then I went back to bed.
Love finding things in common with your besties. It's fine. Everything's
great.
fine.
It's great
We're
stuff.
great over here at HVHQ. Everything's fine.
Things are great. No, and so I went back to bed, and Michael was just like, it's okay. Are you all right? Do you want to talk about it? And I was like, no, go to bed. And he was like, no, it's Lemur time. And I was like, what? And so he spoons me up real good, and he's like, no, it's Lemur time. And I very earnestly, I was just like, what's Lemur time? He's like, I'm a lemur, and I've got this sobbing branch. I'm just going to find some fruit to eat. And just ridiculous shit was coming out of his mouth. And I don't know what the lady love is in it, but there is one.
Finding joy when it's things are bad, I think.
Yeah. Because you and I did that on the phone the other day too,
Boy,
where
that
it's
was
just
a talk we had.
yeah, we worked
We were
through
just sad and
some
vented.
shit on both of our
and-
ends, and then we ended up cracking up about something else. I think it was my plant thievery or some other.
And that's what I told you point blank. I was like, Mel, I am going to bring this is banter. This is tell me about your plant thievery live on pod.
And then I sent you pictures of my son's study
Oh
that
my
I had
God,
done.
listener, it is. I was flabbergasted, frankly.
Anyway, maybe that'll be banter for another day. Yeah, I think it's just trying to find, not even trying, just allowing yourself to find the light and the humor and whatever
I
you
can
can
definitely
fucking
co-sign
grasp.
that lady love, finding the light in the darkness. Your fairy in the Dorian.
Yes, the fairy and the Dorian. Oh. Oof.
All right.
Okay.
So keep being a badass.
And love yourself as much as you love starting a North New Jersey plant stealing ring of just all your trixiest gardeners, okay? getting together and trading native plants that they have pilfered. All right?
You know what? Love yourself as much as that. Love yourself as much as you love having people-less walls.
Yes. Just the emptiest walls. You know? Boy, the emptiest walls.
Yeah. The kind of wall where you don't have to tell yourself that that's a mouse making that sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love yourself as much as you love looking forward to reading Argent's book.
Oh my God. Okay.
That dark villainous hero.
Love yourself as much as that. Bye.
Bye.
Heaving Bosoms is produced by us, Melody Carlisle and Sabrina Bradley. Editing is done by Melody Carlisle.
Our theme music is by the incredible singer-songwriter Brittany Fonts, and our art is by ultra-talented author Kate Pryor. If you like our show, remember to follow us on your favorite podcast app, rate us 5 stars, leave a nice review, and of course, tell all your friends about us, even if they don't read romance.
If you want to get in touch, you can email us at heavingbosomspodcast@gmail.com. If you want more of us, visit patreon.com/heavingbosomspodcast. You can also find us on Instagram at Heaving Bosoms, on TikTok at Heaving_Bosoms, and in our Facebook group, the Heaving Bosoms Geriatric Friendship Cult.
Head over to our website to sign up for our newsletter, get our Reading Embrace printable, and check out my audiobooks at heavingbosoms.com. All right, we'll be back next week with more swoons and snark. See you then.